Speaking of quarterbacks here, like we were with Tim Verghese a minute ago,
Yes, Ravi. Yes.
you got a very interesting DM
I did.
that you shared with me.
I did.
And
I talked to him a lot about football over the years.
we, because you kind of brought this up, you go, hey, he's going to have to pass a lot of guys. Dylan, he's going to have to pass a lot of guys sort of in the pecking order of Big Ten quarterbacks in order to get where we think he can go and get Nebraska where we think they can go.
Yeah, and I felt like I was finding new ways to kind of regurgitate the same topic. And I've asked a lot of our guys that we talk to because I want to get a consensus before the season actually plays out so people can't go back and say, well, and then insert blank. Not about being right or wrong.
Sure.
I just want to know where everybody was coming from.
And I think there's a lot of different ways to think about it. That's why we bring up these different versions.
That's why I asked up different scenarios, right? Because we've said, hey, this is an eight win minimum.
Mm-hmm.
This is blank or this schedule or and we've done all these things. The roster, the position group. And I'm like, hey,
we're trying to get specific now.
If we're gonna make this move, somebody's gonna have to get out of the way. Who are these most likely candidates?
You have to push somebody out of the way.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Who are the most likely candidates to be removed?
Yeah.
And then what does it look like? So I always start with the quarterback spot.
Yeah.
Even more than I look at schedule. Because schedule,
it can change a lot in even mid-year.
Pretty week to weeky.
Yeah.
So,
like,
I want us to understand, regardless of what we think, I want everybody to have the same picture that they're looking at. There are some really talented quarterbacks in this league. And I get it. Yeah, our guy is too, but everybody in their respective cities, their college towns, are basically saying this. They're saying the same thing in Seattle that we are in Lincoln. I mean, they're saying the same thing in Minneapolis. Well, maybe not upside to some degree,
with
with the quarterback spot.
Yeah,
they're saying the same thing in Eugene. They're saying the same thing in Piscataway. They're saying.
So that's where I push back a little bit.
I know, because you've extrapolated high end.
Well, but that's what we're doing with Nebraska in general, right? If we're talking about them taking the leap, there is extrapolation.
I'm not a best case scenario guy.
I understand that. But you're asking how they get to where we're talking about.
Yeah, so if I'm not going to go best case scenario, I want everybody to be operating on the same deal. It's really the only reason why I wanted to land the plane on Raiola's development. Can we talk about it independent of Holgorsen?
Sure.
Because then we start getting into things that everybody could say. You could say in Iowa City. You could say well, if this fit and with this mind, and then let's just look at productivity and making jumps. What are the base things that those individuals can control that I don't need to be super myopic or best case scenario about?
Well, I agree. That makes sense.
Now, you may think of it the other way. Well, let's just say they do all max. Then who would I take? And I'm like, I get it, because it does the same thing. It levels the discussion point.
So I'm not even totally doing that. The way I'm thinking about it is who has the most area left to improve. So if I take Dylan versus a Brosmer up in Minnesota, right? And I go, okay, Max might be a really good college quarterback, and he's been productive, and we kind of like what we see there, right? But if he improves by 10%, his ceiling, like the 10% for Dylan is greater than the 10% for Brosmer, in my mind. Like there's more room.
I get it.
For Dylan to continue
I'm just
to
telling you where I think it gets a little conflated. I mean, would you have said that with Riley Leonard?
I mean, did Riley Leonard get significantly better from Duke to Notre Dame?
No.
I don't think so either.
But they played for a national championship is my point. So is that a disqualifier?
No, because the rest of that team was really good.
Yeah, but okay. Sure.
Yeah.
But you saw the way that game played out at Ohio State.
Yeah.
You needed better
quarterback play.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I get that.
Okay, so I'm just.
But what they needed. So that's Riley Leonard's actually a really good example of kind of what I'm talking about. Right? Is I thought Will.
Thank you.
No, you're doing a great job. Like I thought, and that didn't mean to sound as condescending as I.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
Like I thought Will Howard.
Funny Ravi, Shade, funny Ravi.
So if you're going to argue against me, Will Howard's actually a really good example because I thought he was pretty close to who he was going to be coming out of Kansas State. His throwing elevated to a level I didn't know he had at Ohio State. He ended up making throws at the end of the season more consistently and in places they needed more than I thought he was going to be able to, right? So if you're going to make an argument for like Calic Manis or Brosmer or Gronowski or whoever, some of these guys that I think their ceilings are lower, Will Howard's the example of that. And that I think probably has a lot to do with fit and scheme and talent around him, right? I don't think you're going to have that issue in Rutgers or Iowa City or Minnesota where the other talent around it's so good that it elevates a guy past where I think his ceiling is. What I do think is with a guy like Dylan, as Tim said, and basically everybody we've asked, right? If we're talking about ceilings, it's Nico and Dylan basically in the conference, and no one else is really in that conversation.
I 100% agree, except for...
You're not a huge Nico guy?
No.
Okay. You're not as enamored with him, I didn't think, but...
That's not it.
Okay.
I like the guy in Seattle, too, from a talent standpoint.
Okay.
He's just... His physical features...
aren't as impressive.
Don't scream NFL.
Sure.
But he is uber talented.
Okay. So you want to throw Damon Williams in there?
Guys like that.
Okay. So when we bring this up, part of the reason I do think it matters to bring up the ceiling is if Dylan is the guy that we think he is, and let's put it out on the table here. We think he's a potential future first-round quarterback. That's what we're talking about. Whether he ends up being that or not, I don't know. But when we're talking about potential and ceiling and talent, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about a potential first-round guy. That ceiling gives you an opportunity to pass most of those guys who aren't that. Most guys in the conference aren't that. You know, maybe throw Mendoza in there, like Tim was saying, who's got maybe some dark horse whispers about being a potential first-rounder. If Nico reaches his ceiling, he's a first-rounder. But that's why I can look at it and I go, okay, if Dylan's who I think he is, he passes those guys. Because first-round quarterback passes most everybody else in the league, even really good college quarterbacks. So that's why I feel pretty comfortable saying if he does make that leap, I'm good.
Okay.
You know, like that's why I look at ceiling.
No pushback. So
I want to read this from Stetson here before we get to Mike Sauter here in a minute.
It was a really good response.
It's a really good DM about sort of Dylan, his developments, and what happened last year, right? Because I think we all agree we really liked what it looked like early, kind of got away from him in the middle of the season, sort of started seeing those flashes again late once after Dana took over. He goes, I believe Dylan lost confidence in his wide receivers last year. I think as the season went along, he didn't think they were going to win their matchups and create space. He began hesitating to wait and see if they would come open. That hesitation started causing pressure to get home, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Pressure, bad throws, more sacks, all of that kind of creates a domino effect there. He says, I'm sure you recall Aaron Murray's critical comments about wide receivers' effort from the opener last year. And that game went well, so a lot of us felt some kind of way about Aaron Murray's critique about that. I remember, I did. The fans were quite defensive about his comments, but I think the season proved him right, and I would agree there. Obviously, could be wrong about the cascade of it all, but it sure felt like by late October, when he dropped back, he didn't trust his guys to make a play. And he brought up one particular catch,
and it's a lot longer DM.
Yeah, I was trying to.
And I know I get it because it's not great radio to read it all. My response, I'm like,
it was pretty well thought out and in-depth.
This is pretty fascinating.
Yeah,
I think we should talk about this.
So there was one particular catch that he brought up that I always think of, and then there's one more that I think of as well that I think is really critical that I don't know if I'm the only one that is fixated on.
Well, we haven't talked about it, so I'll tell you.
So the first one he brought up was Isaiah Nair against Illinois.
Yeah.
The one in the end zone, originally called a touchdown, gets switched over to an interception, and that's a ball that probably needs to be a touchdown, right? The other one, and I can't even remember which game it is, but I can see it in my head. It was a post over the middle to Jalen Lloyd.
Mm-hmm.
It was a jump ball. Jalen goes up for it. The defender goes up for it defender comes down with it. It ends up being an interception. I believe that was Dylan's first interception of the season. I think. I might be wrong. And I think I think of those two plays, and I go, I wonder how much that got in his head of, I can't throw a jump ball.
So this is on the heels of, he's like, hey, I've been listening to the discussion with Bruns about the long ball. Mm-hmm. Now, if you remember, and good on, I like his football mind. And we've done this, he and I, for a long, long time. Remember, like in February, this wasn't February, it's like March, where I was talking about the difference between underthrowing and overthrowing is psychological.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked Bruns, I go, hey, I don't want to just backpat. And he goes, no, I think a lot of people are talking about this. So I was like, okay. But to this point, and I had this conversation with Foreman at a practice once, there's something that happens when you overthrow a guy or you miss him by a mile versus right there, just make a play.
Mm-hmm.
Like one, you lose, you're discouraged, but you both can lose confidence.
Mm-hmm.
One is fixable if you upgrade. The other is, this guy just isn't very good.
Yeah.
You're hoping that Nebraska has upgraded and that guy, along the lines of what Stetson is thinking, will be freed up now to go make plays. Because during the season, I would explain it like this. I'd be like, man, just cut it loose. It's been so ingrained to not turn the ball over.
He's a little too precious.
We're just too, just say, hey, man, listen, I'm not telling you to go be haphazard, but let's just go make plays.
Mm-hmm.
Once that starts to happen, then I think you can kind of see the thing open up for him.
What do we hear all the time with really good really good passing games in general? Hey, if you've got a guy in one-on-one, give him a chance to make a play.
Yeah.
Right? I think we got to a point last year where Dylan was not willing to let a guy go try and make a play.
He's the first person that I heard talk about that from the wide receiver standpoint of confidence. And I felt like I got to probably entertain. That's legit.
I think it's a factor. I don't know if it's everything, but I do think that was a factor in what we saw happen with Dylan last year.